Hey there, Baruch. How you doing today?
Thank God, doing well, Yermi. How about yourself?
Thank God, thank God. This is great. This is super exciting. Ninth episode today.
Yeah.
Again, we're here live. This is real live, so not recorded or anything. Um, but yeah, just a little quick recap from the show that we were speaking about earlier today in the podcast. We were talking a little bit about the past, whether or not it dictates the future, and really, most importantly, it's how we live today, how we live right now in the current present moment.
Oh, 100%. And in the pre-show, the pre-game or the pre-game pre-show, when we were first speaking to this guest, um, we got real, we got serious about the past and how that affects, and we're going to share some of that. But you know what? I'm just excited to be here. Yesterday was the Mondayest Monday ever. So I always look forward to. Wait, today's Wednesday.
You mean choose?
Okay. Let's
Yes.
just be guessing because I'm already losing my
Let's
mind.
bring in Mindy. Yeah, we're gonna. Hey there, Mindy. How are you?
Hello, it is Wednesday.
It is. It is. I was about to say, wait a second. Did I go live on a Tuesday? Like, what did I miss here?
No, it's I'm having one of those moments.
It's all
Oh,
good.
boy.
It's all good. I feel the same way.
Anyway, let's get the show started so people can
Yes.
get to
Let's
meet and
jump
get to
right
know
into
Mindy, our star guest for today. So
Yeah.
Mindy Green is our guest today. She is a clinical social worker, certified life coach, and neuroeducator. Having grown up surrounded by large extended family, many of her fondest memories and enduring life lessons came from what she observed and learned during family gatherings. Those childhood experiences fueled her passion to work with parents to create a solid foundation so that they and their families can thrive in all areas of life. I love that. For a while, my tagline was thrive, don't just survive. So I love that you have that there.
Mm.
I'll finish the bio. She is a mom of 4 amazing young adults and grandma to 2 lively grandsons. Mindy, welcome to the show. It's really awesome to have you here. Very impressive bio. And it correlates directly with our episode. Before we dive into the interview and the questions and whatnot, why didn't you tell us a little bit more, or tell our audience a little bit more about who you are and what you're all about?
Certainly. So I think that the bio really does it gives the highlights of things. I've been married to my husband for almost 30 years now. We have 4 children, and we've just felt that we're very fortunate to have this opportunity to grow along with our family. And as you and I were, and we all were talking about on Monday when we had our gathering, our pre-show gathering, we talked about that really that raising children is an opportunity for personal growth. It's the longest and I would say somewhat hardest because we're constantly confronted by our strengths and our weaknesses, the things that trigger us that come from childhood. And so that really has just been, as I've been going through raising my children, homeschooling them for 18 years, now having young adults and having 2 young grandsons, I thought, what a better way to insert my experience with, being a clinical social worker and life coach and neuroeducator into what families are needing. And that's that firm foundation to be able to thrive and, like we talked about, and not just survive.
Right.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I also really related to that whole discussion about, family dynamics and, the children and the right spouse for us. I'm just inspired every time I hear people talking about marriages that are quite a while. I mean, 30 years is a huge milestone. Today, I was on a live show with somebody who was married to his wife for 60 years.
Wow.
And it was just so inspiring. And just the way he was talking and everything, it was really incredible. And, one of the questions that were actually asked today in the live show to this guy when he said, he was married for 60 years, how did you do it? And he literally said, one day at a time, we lived within the moment. We really put the priority on our relationship and our children and stuff like that. And everything else came secondary. This is a man who's extremely wealthy. He's a big you know, he's a big philanthropist, and he was saying all of his wealth and all of his success came simply from putting the right priorities in the right places, starting from his family. So I'm so excited that this is going to be quite a bit of the topic today. Really jumping into, I think we're going to go right into it because it's so important to speak about being in the present moment and being here in the now, despite all the issues that we had in the past, in the future, whatever it is. But being here in the moment, I think that's a big thing. So, kind of like as an introduction, Mindy, what would you have to say about being in the present moment? And
Really, this is the moment that we do have. And if I think that we end up suffering quite a bit when we bring past experiences into the present. And it's not that you can't acknowledge what they are. And I think that really one of the things that we had discussed before, and I think was really brought on this topic, was a quote that I had shared a couple of months ago, or several months ago now, on LinkedIn. And that was talking about, there's a difference between moving forward and moving on. And so moving forward is embracing the things that have happened in the past, the failures, those awkward moments, the painful things, and recognizing that that's part of who you are, but it doesn't confine you to that either. We're more than that. Mm-hmm. So we bring the lessons, the things that we learn from that with us to then make decisions and choices that better serve us in the present moment.
Wow. Yeah. That's so incredible. Because one of the things that I hear a lot from some of my coaches is the idea of folding time, that, we can learn from people who have gone through years of experience and sometimes trauma or challenges or whatever it is. And, there's two ways to learn things, either from your own experiences or from other people's experiences. Mm. So when you learn from your experiences, you have to go through that in order to learn. But then you can learn from somebody else's experience. And that's kind of this concept of, folding time, like this is a space travel sort of sciencey thing. But, if it took them 10 years to go through that experience to learn a certain lesson, we can do that same thing in a much shorter amount of time because we're going off of their experiences. So, it's the same thing with us sharing with those that we're going to lead, or those that are in our family. It's like we went through certain experiences and we learned lessons, and we can make sure that our kids don't have to learn those lessons the hard way. And we can kind of full time for them in that sense.
Right. And I mean, that LinkedIn sort of share that you shared the other time, Mindy, which actually got me to think about why you were the perfect guest for this show, was a very, very important thing. And I think we should somewhat elaborate a tiny bit more on it, because there is a huge difference between moving forward and just moving on. Moving on, I feel, at least when I hear it, and I think I shared that on your post, when I hear moving on, it's kind of like I'm ignoring my past. I'm ignoring things that happened, before, rather than moving forward is, I feel I need to legitimize my past. I need to somewhat validate it to a certain degree, because the healthier way is that I believe that everything that's done to us or that we sort of experience is important in order to take it as tools for the future. If I didn't have my rough past, I probably would not be able to help the people that I'm helping today. And I probably just wouldn't have the same kind of meaning and purpose. I mean, I don't know, but, by moving forward, it's by me embracing my past, learning the lessons that I needed to learn from it. All the stuff that no longer serves me, I got rid of, or I just moved it away, or, pack it up nicely and unpack the baggage kind of thing, put away the clothes, put them in the right place. But I took whatever was necessary for me to take. Sometimes I harbor certain pains to feel the pain that certain clients are going through, to come with more empathy, to come with being more present there for them. And that's why, being present in the moment, that's why it's really important.
I agree with everything you said. And I think that some people may have heard in the audience, the issues lie in our tissues. So whenever we have a past experience, it's in the tissues of our brain. There are neural pathways, and I'm going to be a neuro geek for a moment. But there are certain pathways that have been created based on those experiences. And so part of the work of being in the moment now is recognizing that you did have an experience, and consciously then making intentional choices to create a new pathway so that you can create a new habit, you can create a new thought, and the emotion that goes with that. Because otherwise, and as adults, we have very long and deep connections, neural connections. So it's important to be able to put a timestamp sometimes on an experience so that we know that the way that we felt, the way that we thought was because of a certain experience that happened at a certain time. And now that then creates space to be able to make a new attachment, a new connection.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm just listening. You hear me? Keep going, because I'm taking this all in. I'm processing.
Well, Baruch, what are your thoughts about harboring the past versus anything in the past that you are perhaps holding on to, or that you think is no longer self-serving? How, like, what's your take on
right,
moving forward versus moving on?
Well, it's a very challenging thing, I think, and especially for many people, and it's hard to make a blanket statement, so to speak. But again, from my experience, is like I've looked at that. I've seen people who have held on to something and let it control themselves as they try to move on, and move forward with life. And it doesn't, because it always comes back as this excuse, as this reason for, oh, this is why things are like this. Whereas, you can look at it as, well, no, like we said, this happened, but that happened then. Now I'm creating the future. I'm creating the now. I think in the episode of Jeremy, you said the word now like 5 times or 5 or 6 times. I don't know if that was this episode or a different one, but it was like the now, the now. Yeah. So, but that's the thing, is it's like, okay, well, where are we right now, and where do we want to go? Now, when I'm working with a coaching client, I do, the first step I do with them is, where are we right now, and where do we want to go? Okay, but how did we get to where we are? Because there is influence from the past, and it needs to be dealt with. And that's one of my ways of determining, do I need to send this individual first to a therapist or a counselor who's qualified to deal with some really deeply ingrained things, or are we ready to move to the future? But I strongly believe that everything that has happened to us in the past is meant for us to be able to build a better present and a better future. We wouldn't be here in Dallas today if it weren't for, like we were talking about, this family unit and all the things that happened in our past. I was just speaking to an individual who was out here, because we're both autism parents, or parents of individuals that are autistic, and we're working on some programming, and we were talking about our journey and how we got here and all the events that led up to finding the school that we found for my son. And if we weren't focused on that family unit, we weren't focused on that development, the self-development of, like you said, Mindy, as a parent, being a parent is the best self-development, personal development program you could ever have. If we weren't focused on that, we wouldn't be here. And it's because of the events in the past that we were able to get to where we are. I don't know if that answered it. I kind of rambled, chasing rabbits.
Well, and I think also our unique experiences allow for us to then seek out opportunities that will then help us to grow as well, because we know that there are certain things that we might have interest in that came from childhood, and then and then we pursue those interests, and then and as we continue to shed some of the some of our past as well, it creates new interests, and then we can pursue those as well. And so I think that that's why it's important to recognize that we change every day anyway. We are not the same person that we are yesterday or were yesterday. We are a new person, because we wake up, sometimes in a different frame of mind. We have new challenges, new things that stretch us each day. And so as much as we might want to stay the same,
Right.
or we might say that we don't like change, the reality is that change is happening anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Mindy, this is also something that you and I have spoken several times ever since. We're very good LinkedIn friends, so we comment a lot on each other's stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we also talk about in the work of happiness, a course that we are going to be that Bark and I are going to be relaunching very soon. But the work of happiness talks about how this directly affects our overall happiness levels. What tends to
Mhm.
happen is that people get overly worked up about things that happened in the past. Very easy to fall into victimization. A lot of and I'm currently working with a client, and we're helping this business professional parent better. So
Mhm.
we're taking a lot of the stuff that she does in her leadership position, and we help her see the parallels in the same way with her children. And what's coming up a lot, and she shared this a lot with me, is that she realizes through insights, through the coaching and through the consulting that we're doing, she's learning that a lot of her past is coming and dictating how she's parenting her child, despite whether or not she believes it, or despite whether or not this is things that she wants to do when she's parenting her child. But she sees how her past is affecting, you know and she refers it to her future. And that really is really interesting to me, because what tends to happen when we're talking to people, they tend to talk a lot about their past and their future, and it seems like the here and now sort of disappears in between. And that to
Mhm.
me is interesting. I don't know. I think getting over the past in a healthy way is important first, but also not really forgetting the here and now. And I'm wondering, my question to you more is, what's that leap from, getting over the past and people who are jumping to the future? What are you seeing? What are, even in your experience, or what are your thoughts about it?
I think that what happens is, like you said, that we tend to replay the things in our past, and that becomes really strong. And so there are certain strategies that you can use to be able to ground yourself in the moment. And so we had spoken the other day that I'm taking a positive intelligence course. And so one of the things that I really like about that is that it's disrupting, the thought pattern in the moment, by grounding yourself, by, really tapping into your senses,
Mm,
and that helps you to some of it's breathing, some of it's tactile, some of it is visual, and those things help to bring us back to the moment. And it is hard at times, because
mhm.
we're distracted and we're thinking about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Right.
But I think one of the things that really struck me when my kids especially were younger is looking at their faces and how disappointed they were when I would say, let me do this, and then, or shoo them away. And they were disappointed. And I just remember that those faces, and just thinking, it's like they need me now. And now
Mhm.
having young adults, it's like that window of time, is over, and they need me in
Mm,
new and different ways. But,
right.
being able to sit with them, even though I might have a million things to do, and read a book,
Yeah.
or sing with them, or go to their, they were heavily into sports, so going to their sports games and things. So I think it's really learning to honor what's going on in the moment, and recognize that you
Mm,
have other people. Our kids are learning to model their behavior after us.
right.
And
Right.
Right.
so, we are those role models. And if we, are always showing that we don't have time, or we're pushing them aside, then, what type of message does that send? And I can remember growing up and having that happen to me, and
Right.
so I think that's one of the lessons that I can bring from childhood is, like, when my parents maybe didn't have time for me or were distracted, and thinking about how do I want to show up for my kids.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the stories that we shared in our first meeting. Was the other day when I was taking my family shopping. It was actually the day that Jeremy and I were scheduled to meet with you, and obviously you heard the story, but I'm sharing it with the audience. Um, and I was rushing, and like I was just, and being able to look at the past of what typically happens when I get stressed trying to hit a meeting or something, you know, inevitably I end up getting uptight and upset and anxious towards my kids and towards my wife, and it just ends up making things a lot worse. So I remember running through the what do you call it, the supermarket, and just having to remind myself, okay, wait a second, slow down. It's not worth it right now. We're here because, and even just when I'm out with my kids shopping or whatever we're doing, I catch myself constantly trying, don't do this, don't do that, just sit nicely, stand nicely, walk nicely. And what the reason behind it is because I'm trying to make sure that as when they grow up, they're going to be proper, polite human beings. But what about now? Right now, they're kids. It's totally normal for them to be kids. And again, like you said, parenting is probably one of the best personal development programs you can go through because it forces you to really think about your actions, and then it forces you to think about yourself. And then thinking even for myself, you know what? Yeah, I need to chill. I need to relax. So, I forgot why I was saying that, but it was connected to what you're saying. More water.
Well, I think too that sometimes we expect our children to behave a certain way. Right. They're not little adults. They're not miniature. Right. They're not mini me's. Their development. I think that that's one of the things that I have to remember too, is that I can't expect them to respond a certain way when I can't even do that sometimes as an adult. So it's like recognizing and honoring their development and where they're at, their capacity to handle things, to hold things. And I used to say to my kids, use your words, but then I realized that they don't always have the words to be able to articulate that because they don't have the context that I do as an adult. And even as an adult, sometimes I'm not able to articulate things. So how can I expect my children to do that?
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah. And I love what Jen over here is saying. You were going to point that out too?
Go. Yeah, I was literally about to. You go ahead. Yeah.
But that's so it's, Jen says, how we do anything is how we do everything. How we show up for our kids in any given moment is a mirror for how we are not showing up for ourselves. So to the first part, how we do anything is how we do everything. One of my biggest pet peeves is people who don't bring the shopping carts back to the shopping cart stall. I'm not talking about in the store, but the one in the parking lot. Why are you leaving it out there? But you know what? Those are the people who that's how they're treating their life. So it's a trivial thing, like bringing the shopping cart to the. But I make a point of always doing it, and my son has actually called me out on it. That he's 6.5 years old, that he's saying, "Why aren't you doing that?" But again, the second part is how we show up for our kids is it's a mirror of how we are. 95% of my frustrations with my kids or anybody else, really, my students, those are frustrations that I have, and being about myself and being, able to be present in the moment and think about how do I need to be doing this differently. So, Jen, thank you so much for bringing that up. Jeremy, why don't you speak to that for a little bit?
And I just wanted to just touch upon that also a second. What's coming to me, and I'm like, it's just playing in my head all this time as we're having this discussion, and as Jen was commenting, such a powerful comment. It's the Cat Stevens songs of the Cats in the Cradle, and it's really just playing in my mind the entire time. And this is how I show up as a parent: is I keep playing that in my mind and saying, I grew up with one of my parents being almost never there. We hardly saw him, and do I want to be that kind of parent to my child? And then sometimes asking, okay, but what was that parents like, and they had also some absent parents in a sense. And so it's very important to like we were all saying here, is to show up and to be in the here and now. And just this past weekend, my wife and I, we were playing with our little toddler, and we're just like enjoying every moment with him right now. He's developing, and it's really exciting. And he's getting to that point where he's doing new things every day. And my wife has, as kind of, it's more of a knee-jerk reaction, and I believe mothers experience this more It's kind of like, no, it's my baby, don't grow up too fast, you know. And I hear this a lot, mostly from mothers coming, and I feel that, and as much as that's valid, I mean, we have a strong sense of like my kid's growing up, and I also feel that sometimes. But to me, I work actively in my mind to appreciate every moment of the child and to appreciate every moment of its development, because time will move on. Before you know it, your child is a teenager. Before you know it, your child's going off to college. Before you know it, your child is getting married, having their own children and everything. And if we're just always kind of living in this past of like, I want my baby still to be my baby, you know, we're missing out on the current, like every single development of my child. I'm celebrating and I'm enjoying that right here, right now. Every time he does a new coup, or every time he figures out a new toy or whatever it is, it's so exciting. And that to me is what's coming out of this discussion, is really enjoying the here and now for every level of development in our children, in our life, in anything.
And I can say you're me for me as well, that that's what I've been thinking about Cat in the Cradle. And
Mhm.
that's, our children are going to mimic what they see us doing. And so that's what that song is all about, right? And
Right.
I can say that there have been things that I've enjoyed about each stage of development with my kids, and I've grown along with them and have had
Yeah.
a better understanding of why they do the things that they do. And I have to say, though, I was the mom who would say, "Oh, I don't want you to grow up," and I would make a little joke and I would say, "Okay, we have an
Yeah.
agreement that you can't get older than 10." Because after 10, it's like things change, and so,
Yeah.
and when they each year after that, we would just kind of make a joke, and I'm like, okay, you're not holding up to your end of the agreement. And at the same time, recognizing that each stage has things that are really delightful and things that you don't really enjoy as much, and that's okay.
Hmm. Right. Right.
So here's my
Absolutely.
question, because I like to get really, really practical. How do we effectively be present, get present? Because there's so many distractions
Mm.
going on. And there's just so much stress in life, and just like, I don't know. I would like to say that in my parents' day and age things were easier than nowadays, but realistically, I think every generation has their issues and their challenges. But with everything going on in our personal lives and in our external lives, what are some ways that we can actually effectively be more present?
Hmm.
So one of the things that I often think about is putting down the distractions, and what is a distraction. So I think it's doing an assessment in your own life about what is it, where are those, I guess I call them energy leaks.
Mm.
So what are things that are where places where you're leaking energy in your life? So for me, I can say it's scrolling on Facebook, I'm over on LinkedIn, and it's, it for me, it's like I realize after a time that my battery is just really depleted. And that's
Hmm.
time that I could be doing something else. I could be reading, I could be spending time with my husband, or, with my children. And it's kind of setting limits and boundaries
Mm.
around your time.
Hmm.
Um, and I can say quite honestly that I haven't been good about that, but I'm working
You're
on it.
human.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's an area for growth for me, a place where I can grow, is setting a time limit on how long I'm going to be on social media, for instance. Or, if my kids come and talk to me and I'm in the middle of watching a show, who cares? At this point, everything I can, it's on Netflix or some other streaming app, and I can go back and watch that. And, I'd rather have that time with my kids.
Right.
Right. Right.
So, but I think it's really recognizing, where we have those energy leaks, and then, being honest with ourselves about, our priorities.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely. And that's why, by the way, I changed our little, whatever you call this title thingy, to staying grounded, because I think, although I did want to go to that discussion after the idea of understanding the future, but we'll get back to understanding the future soon. But really, Baruch, you're asking a very, very powerful question, and Jen in the comments is on fire as usual. She was saying, being present, it's a conscious choice, and there's a lot of practice involved. she's 100% right in this. And what you're saying, Mindy, is about understanding that there is a time and a place for everything. And like we all try, we all are somewhat addicted to our technology in a sense. And the Facebook, the Instagram, the LinkedIn, the Netflix, whatever it is. And sometimes our kids really really need us. And I've discovered, at least with my children, um, with the youngest, with the toddler, 10 minutes is more than enough for that child, and then tired out, and all he wants is his sissy and go back to bed. With the older ones, sometimes it only requires about 20 to 30 minutes. They want to be heard. They want to talk about their day. They want to talk, and it's something that we were discussing. I don't know if it was in these live shows or another place, but I remember as a child growing up, I had a teacher, and he randomly just one day gave us a thing of chocolate. And the way it works with this, it happened in Israel when I was in Israel. Um, the chocolate in Israel used to have 24 squares on them. So it's a known Israeli chocolate. It's called milk chocolate, cow chocolate, something like this. They used to have 24 squares, and the teacher just randomly gave one to every single student. And that was like, wow, thank you so much. And then after he gave it to us, he looked at the children and he asked, "Could I just have one square? Just give me one square out of all the 24 squares that you have. Could you not give me? I mean, I just gave you 24 squares. Please give me one." And the lesson that he was teaching us is that we're given 24 hours in a day. Can we not give one back? I mean, he was trying to teach us a lesson about God. So give back, give God 1 hour of your day. But I learned that in every aspect of my life. Towards parenting, I take that into parenting. I will give my family a minimum of 1 hour a day, at least. Could I not do that? And that's what's coming to me. And to me, it's about staying that grounded and understanding what are my priorities at the end of the day.
And Jen had mentioned too, being present is about redirecting ourselves back to now, just like we direct our kids as they develop. And
Mm-hmm.
that's true. I used to think that I was a failure at meditation when I would try to
Wow.
meditate or sit quietly, because my mind was just pinging all over the place. And I'm like, what is going on here? I'm failing at being still.
Right.
But I think that one of the things is that is part of that process. And, the more we struggle with that, then I think that makes it even more frustrating for us, rather than recognizing that it's natural, it's normal for our thoughts to go different places,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of make a big deal out of it rather than just like kind of chilling with it and like, oh, okay, that's normal. It's all right. And
Right.
so I think that that's part of staying grounded as well, is recognizing that we'll have competing thoughts and competing um, emotions and things like that, because we're going to
Right.
feel the pull of those other things,
Mm.
and that's okay. It's
Right.
acknowledging that, but then as Jen had said so well, redirecting it.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that I've just recently covered with one of my counselors was this idea of one. I mean, there's a lot. I'm not going to go into a therapy session now, but one of the main things that we're working on with, especially with me and my challenges, whatever it may be, is my desire to be so far ahead compared to where I
Mm.
am. And so there's certain, as you're building a business, you have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Or as you're maintaining a family, you have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And we're so focused on trying to get there that we're having these failures or things that we're deeming failures now, when in reality, in this stage of our life, with what we're going through now, we have to be aware of what is our present, what is our here and our now, and
Right.
then what is realistic for where we are now. Right now, it's not realistic for me to be doing ABC. I should be doing DEF. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but that's the thing. And it's the same thing with parenting is right now, okay, I would love to be able to have these wonderful, amazing experiences with my son. But right now, all he wants is, like Jeremy said, 10, 20 minutes of my time playing cars. Is my alarm? I don't know. Being present. Squirrel. And then in the future we'll be able to do, the bigger things. Because, I took him out to we have a place here called Adventure Landing. It's like a go-kart and mini golf place. And I took him there one night and he absolutely loved it. But honestly, spending 20 minutes at home playing Legos with him is probably the same value. So it's, I think one of the things that I'm getting from all this is understanding in my current situation, what is the, what is the expectation? What is truly what needs to be done? How do we be present right now? And then in the future, we'll deal with being present in that form later.
I think that's a really good point, because so often it's like, and when we start to think about the future, then that we do think about, what we're kind of forecasting ahead, what's going to be needed. But we need to be here and now to build the skills. And I agree with you, especially when it comes to my business. I'm thinking that I need to be, I need to be a TEDx speaker, or I need to be a best-selling author. But it's how I show up each day, the little things that I do, the little habits that I create now, the conscious choices that I make that help me to move. And then I get nudged, and I kind of plateau a little bit, and then I'm like, and I catch my breath, and then I get those nudges again, and new opportunities show up, and then that's when I go on to the next thing. But we're trying to run when really we're need to just take the next step.
Yeah. I'm just going to highlight one more thing Jen is saying. She's really on fire here. And she's really talking to something that I always say, which I took from a movie I was watching with my sisters once, The Princess Diaries, where that she says something like I don't remember who the main actress is, like the queen, whatever her name is, and she says like, a queen is never late, everybody else is simply early. So I also took that, but it's for me my way of staying grounded, in the sense of like, everything's going to happen on time, on its time. And if there's ever a reason for something to not go as planned or whatever, there's a master plan that's working, that's beyond our control. And so everything is just really happening on time, and everybody else is simply early. That's the way I'm taking that. And right before we're going to jump into that part of the discussion, it's just that part of the show where we're going to remind everybody, first of all, thank you everybody who's showing up consistently. Jen today is incredibly on fire. Ari-san is here today. He's saying that he's loving the topic. I saw Rick. I saw Gracie. Who else did I see? I saw Kenny. So there's Katie is also here. But again, thank you everybody who's showing up on the on the comments and everything. We do have, I'm just going to remind you that we do have a clubhouse tomorrow at 7:00. The link is on LinkedIn, and if you're following us on social media, it's everywhere over there as well. But if you can't, you just go on Clubhouse and look for the club, the Exceptionally Irresistible Club, and it's there. You could show up, and we highly encourage you to come there, because we want to hear your inputs, your thoughts, what you have to say. Baruch and I spoke 20 minutes this morning about this topic. Today, Mindy is great, so gracious enough with her time and so generous, sharing us with her inputs and stuff. And we'd like to hear your generous inputs as well. And that's when we invite you tomorrow to the clubhouse at 7 p.m. With that being said, I want to tie in this discussion to understanding the future. I don't think we should live in the future. I think let me just tie this up, and then I want to hear what both of you have to say. By number one, I think it's a step-by-step process, at least the way I see it. Getting over the past, in the sense of taking what I need, what's important to me to move forward, not allowing myself to get bogged down by old negative pains or whatever it is that's going to hold me down. Removing and releasing those things that no longer are serving me, and taking and holding on to things that I could learn from and grow from. The next step is really living in the here and now, and being grounded, being present, being in the moment. And I am living to a certain degree for the future, because I'm building a future. However, I think it's more about understanding the future through living in the here and now. And what Baruch was saying earlier, that I said a lot of nows, is that the past is a now that has passed. It's gone. It was a now in the moment at some period, but then it's gone. It's in the past. The future is a now that hasn't yet happened, and right now is a now that is happening right now, and it's the only thing that's really consistent, because the now that happened a few seconds ago is in the past, and the now that's going to happen in a few seconds from now is the future, but the only thing that's happening is the immediate now. So to me, at least, and I would love to hear both of your inputs, um, to me at least, I'm living my now at the best now that it could be, in a sense that I want this now to grow. Like my next now that's like the next now that's coming is going to grow, only enhancing the current now. And it's only going to sort of like, I want to create a snowball effect, a momentum, if you will, that my now in the future would be a great now. So Mindy, what are your thoughts about that?
Whew. Let me just breathe for a moment. Goodness.
Right?
That was really deep, Jeremy. Well, and I do agree with you that I think that, as soon as I say this word, the next word that I say is the future. And so we don't often think about that. We think of the future as something that's far off.
Right.
It could be next week. It could be next year. It could be the vacation that we're planning in 2 years. It could be the house that we want to buy in 5 years. It could be
Right.
all of these things. But I think that when we connect it back to what we're doing now, it's it's the intention that we live, and so with that, then we're taking steps, we're planting the seeds for what our future is. And so just like Jen had said, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And so therefore, if we're wanting to make changes in the future for that some far off date, it depends on what we're doing right now. So it's like, how are we taking care of ourselves? How are we thinking about, about things? And I saw a quote, and I didn't write it down, so I'm going to try my best to share this. But it said, so often we're trying to be a good descendant when really we need to think about being a good ancestor. And so I heard that, and I was like, oh my goodness, it was like, it just hit me that, the things that we're doing now, we're creating our own legacy for, future generations. So what we're doing right now matters.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. A lot of this is all reminding me of, I don't know how many of you either of you or how many of our audience has watched The Lord of the Rings, but this character Bilbo Baggins, right? He's got this line at the party, and it's great. He says this thing about this and that, and everybody just looks at him like you fell off of planet Mars. But like I feel like that's what's going on here. Is like the now is the future now is a now, which brings me, of course, to Gandalf, his line, which is that a wizard is never late, nor is he ever early. He arrives precisely when he means to. I don't know that I can understand the future. I think the only way I can understand the future is when the future is the present, and I've been able to look back at the past to see how the past affected the future. I mean, I agree with what both of you are saying. It's how we live now affects our future. And in my mind, how do we try to understand the future? I don't like, you can try to plan for the future. You can try to set things up so that the future looks good and is good. And that's like we were talking about, like the habits that we're implementing and the skills that we're building now and the way we're training ourselves and the way we're training our kids. And I love what you said about, instead of being a good descendant, be a good, I don't know if you said ancestor, but be a good, like that is extremely powerful, because at the end of the day, like we can't affect the past, but we can affect the future. But I don't know if there's a way to understand it. Maybe it's understanding what needs to be done for the future. I don't know.
Well, I would challenge, and I would say,
yeah, please,
that one good act that you do today could lead to another good act that you're going to do tomorrow.
Right.
One act of kindness that you do today has some kind of perpetual effect to the future. Vice versa is also true. If you're doing something negative today, that could have a negative effect in the future. And so, and it really boils down to deciding what is it that you want to do. I like to put most of my energy in the positive,
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm always in this perpetual positive,
Right.
you know, cycle, if you will. And so for me, and I really relate to what Mindy was saying about that, being that good ancestor, and we're always so busy being this great, descendant. I had some really heavy hitters as grandparents. Like, they were like, whoo, people, and we always grew up in this shadow of their greatness. You should be like them, or you should make them proud, and whatever. I agree to a certain degree. I want to be a good descendant, in the way that I'm also a good ancestor. I think they go hand in hand together. I want my grandkids to look up at me and say, now that's something I want to follow. You hear a lot. I talk about a grandfather of mine, who's actually my great grandfather, my grandmother's father, and he was like the patriarch of the family. And a lot of my things that I believe in and that I am, comes from this grandfather of mine. And I often speak about his quotes, but I'm living those quotes for my kids, for my future, because of how inspired I am by this ancestor of mine. So I want to be that ancestor for my children as well. And so that, to me, is understanding the future, is by taking the good lessons of the past, implementing them currently in the present, and perpetually, hopefully that they're going to be perpetual for the future. So all my actions that I'm taking today are things that are going to be in some kind of creating a cycle, creating this snowball, for the future.
So I would add 2 words. Sorry, I'm
No,
just gonna
please
really
go
quickly,
ahead.
and then let's get back to you. I would add 2 words to that then. Instead of understanding the future, it's understanding the potential of the future. I don't know. That
Mm.
to me makes a little more sense. But Mindy, go ahead, please.
And I apologize to you. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you. I
usually
just was so
yes.
excited. I was like, ooh.
No, it's
Um,
great. It's a great conversation.
I think that, and I agree with you, because I think it is about it's the potential for the future, and that's what we're doing right now. Is we're creating, we're putting out there opportunities. The possibilities are endless, and that's really why it's important to look at what we're doing now. And I think that sometimes we recognize what has happened in a future time when it becomes the present or the past, as time
Hmm.
flows, by reflection. Reflection is so
Right.
powerful,
Right.
because then we can see, some things that when we're in the midst of it that we weren't able to and so it's looking back on things, and we can see how things were connected, how maybe something didn't work out that we thought what we thought was a failure in the moment pointed us to something different. So I think that, and Jen actually talks about this quite a bit, that the that everything in life is working for her, not against her. And I
Right.
agree with that. And it's when you think about that way, it's really powerful that any decision that we're making, you know um, is moving us forward into that future.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to highlight one thing that Margaret was saying, actually, and thank you, Margaret, for joining. And it's really that the only thing that's in our power is the current now, and what we make out of the now. Obviously, learning from the past, and the potential of the future and all these things, but we are powerless over the past at this point. We are powerless over the future. For the most part, we are powerless of what's happening in the current moment, but we have the power to do the best of whatever we have now. And then I'm going to leave it to Baruch and Mindy for last words. Mindy, you go first, and then Baruch, you kind of tie up the show.
Sure.
Because as far as I'm going to say, this is the last thing I want to say, is that this was one of the most deepest
Oh
conversations
yeah.
and in the most funnest kind of atmosphere that we had. So thank you, Mindy, for bringing a lot of that energy into the show, and everybody in the comments and everything. This has been incredible. So from me, at least, thank you, everybody. And Mindy, any last words?
Well, you had mentioned something too that really struck me, and it was that, so often we are in reactionary mode rather than being responsive. And so I think that that's where, sometimes we hear there's a power in the pause, And that's really being able, going back to grounding ourselves, to recognize that maybe we're frantically running through the supermarket, or, for me, it's like I'm telling my kids to hustle, 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 and just stopping for a moment, and, it's breathing, it's grounding ourselves, recognizing what we want. And that moves us from reaction to responsive. And I think that when we look at that in the context of past, present, future, it's creating more intention, being more consciously aware of where we are now.
Love
So
that. Yeah.
anyway, thank you.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. Jeremy, this definitely was another great show. And again, thank you to everybody that tuned in, that contributed. Thank you, Mindy, for being here. I'm going to say that probably the biggest lesson, well, I can't say that because that's not true. One of the lessons learned from this episode is it's really been a really clear example. This show itself, like the live show, because in the past we set out, Jeremy, that the show was going to last 45 minutes.
Right.
I think we had maybe one episode that lasted 45 minutes. So understanding the future based off of the present is that I think we're just going to have to say from now on it's going to be up to an hour. That way people expect it, because you know what? It's so hard to consolidate everything into
so
such a
true
short period of time. But this was, again, another incredible episode. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the incredible comments. As Jeremy mentioned before, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Eastern Time on Clubhouse, we have the Exceptionally Irresistible Club, where it's your chance as the audience to contribute, to not be the audience anymore, but to be the contributors, to be the speakers, to be the guests. We love hearing from you all. From all y'all. Apparently, that's what we say in the South. If you're talking to one person, it's y'all. If you're talking to many people, it's all y'all. So we love hearing from all y'all. And as always, any questions, comments, any questions, comments, feedback, input, please send it to exceptionallyirresistible@gmail.com. I wasn't sure if there was a "the" in there or not, but to exceptionallyirresistible@gmail.com. And as always, on Friday, we will have our recap of the show with everything broken down into bite-sized pieces, as well as the ways to get a hold of Mindy, to get in contact with her, how to follow her, and just learn more about her. So once again, thank you. I can't stop myself now. Thank all y'all for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow night, God willing, and see you in the comments. Have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend.
See you all. Bye-bye.